Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is a first mother and a late discovery step-adoptee. She grew up in rural Minnesota with no running water or electricity, and by the time she graduated from high school, she'd learned books were an oasis and her guitar a good friend. After earning a social work degree, she embarked on a year-long bicycle trip across North America before settling in Alaska. An artist at heart, she is a self-taught silversmith, singer, songwriter, and plays the guitar, banjo, bass, and saxophone. She resides with her husband in Denali, Alaska, and works as a park ranger during the summer months. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Candace Cahill.
It's wonderful to be here with you.
Candace, our opening question is always, so what took you so long to write a book?
Well, I never thought I would write a book. It actually was instigated by my husband to a certain extent. We were on vacation in the Caribbean, celebrating our 50th birthdays. And we were sitting on the beach, and we had just gotten life insurance policies. So I jokingly turned to him and I said, "So what are you going to do if I die?" And he said, I'm going to go sailing. I'm going to buy a sailboat and sail around the world. And then I'm going to eat a lot of food. He loves street vendor food. And then he turned to me and said, "Well, what would you do?" And I didn't hesitate. I said, "Well, I would buy a little cabin on a lake and I would write a book." And he immediately retorted with, "Why wait?" So I started that spring. We bought me a computer, my own little, laptop dedicated to the book, and I began writing. And that was in the spring of 2019.
Well, Candace, we share the adoption story from different perspectives. Can you tell us more about your story and the inspiration for your memoir?
Yes. So my memoir is titled Goodbye Again. And it is about losing my son twice, the first time to adoption as an infant. And then 23 years later, after we had reunited and met one time in person, he passed away, sadly, in his sleep. So my story is really about how the grief of relinquishment mirrors that of death, and how for many first parents, there's no recognition of that. There's no recognition of the loss. There's so much focus on the adoption is beautiful. That's the prevailing narrative in society. So I wanted people to have a way to see that even though there can be beauty in adoption, it begins with the severance of a family, the separation of a family. So that was really, I wanted people to hear that story because I don't think that it's very widely understood or known. And the fact that my son had died, it immediately opened people's hearts. So like when I told people that I relinquished a son to adoption, which I very rarely did because I was very ashamed of it. So I rarely said that. When I did, though, it was usually, "Oh, you're so brave and how wonderful and what a gift you've given," right? No recognition of the loss. But when I tell someone my son has died, it's an immediate sympathetic reaction. And I'm hoping that people will use my story to understand that they should be recognizing that loss as well.
Well, it certainly is a double-sided coin for all of us, in adoption and such a complex subject.
Absolutely. And I think the more stories, the more narratives we get out into the world, the more people will have an opportunity to understand and talk about it. I really hope that my memoir will also be used as a tool to open up conversations among all the people in the adoption constellation, not just adoptees and birth parents and adoptive parents, but grandparents, siblings, everyone that's involved.
Well, when you knew you were going to write this book and after you had written it, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to use a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
When I completed my book, when the manuscript was quote unquote done, and I think most writers will understand that there's kind of no such thing, but when I thought it was done, I decided to pursue an agent. So I completed the book at the end of 2020. So the pandemic gave me time to really focus on it. So I began querying agents in the beginning of 2021. And then I got a job at the national park, so I was working all summer and let it go to the wayside. And when summer ended, I reevaluated and I was like, well, I had sent out probably, I don't know, maybe 30 queries to agents, had a couple of requests for pages, one request for a full, but nothing came from it, right? And when I reevaluated in the fall, I looked at the fact that I was a small beans writer. Brand new writer, don't have a big platform. Any of those things that typically they're looking for, agents and publishers. And I also had done research and realized that, modern, the way things are modern, publishers typically don't do a lot of the marketing for you anymore, particularly if you're a small author. And I was like, well, why am I paying an agent if the agent and the publisher aren't helping me with my marketing? If I have to do this all myself, why am I doing that? So I decided to quit querying agents and started submitting to small publishing houses. And actually the very first one I submitted to picked me up. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to run with that. And so it's a small press called Legacy Book Press. And it's been wonderful. I think she does about 6 titles a year. And she's fairly new, just been doing it for a few years. But it has been a great experience working with a small publisher.
Well, there's so many options available to authors these days, and I certainly think small presses are really unsung heroes to get some of the work out there that wouldn't normally be picked up by the big houses.
The Legacy Book Presses, their focus is on legacy stories. So I was a really good fit with them. Yeah.
Does your family support your career as a writer? Sometimes writing memoir can be a real touchy subject in families.
I have been very supported. My husband has been my biggest cheerleader. And in fact, our story, him and I, the romance and our adventure is a through line story in my memoir. So because the main topic of the book tends to be pretty heavy and pretty strongly sad, bringing his influence or his impact on me as a human being and putting that in there helps to keep this light through line. So, but he's been really my biggest cheerleader and supporter. But while I was writing the book, he wouldn't read it at all. He refused to read it. He wouldn't talk to me about it, anything, because he didn't want to influence the actual story itself. So the day that I sent my manuscript to the publisher as the final version is when he read the book. So that was pretty exciting. My son's family, his adoptive family, completely supported me all the way through. When I told them that I was wanting to write my story, which is very much about my son, I needed them to know, and I needed really for them to be okay with that. And all of them signed. Like none of their names are changed in the book or anything. They signed releases to have their real names, and have been behind me 100%. So it's interesting though. My siblings are the only ones in the book, other than people who's like my son's birth father. I protected his identity. There's a couple of people I protected, but other in terms of family and friends, the only people who wanted their names changed were my siblings, which I thought was interesting.
It's amazing. We just don't know who's going to, be supportive and who's not. And the secrets from so many years ago are still difficult to bring to light. What about publicity? You talked about small presses not providing a lot of publicity, and even the large presses don't as well. So, have you found anything that works, or maybe even that didn't work for you?
Doing this on my own and taking charge of it. And part of it is I love learning new things and doing new things. So it totally plays into some of my strengths in terms of willingness to put myself out there. But I have utilized free resources anywhere and everywhere that I can find them. Facebook groups, for example, let's see, the Creative Nonfiction Facebook group, it's run by a woman who is a marketing guru, and it's free, so using that, I continue to use supportive people on Twitter. For example, there's a women writers group where we share information about where to pitch for companion essays. So just really taking advantage of the things that are out there that don't cost any money. Yeah, that's been very helpful for me. And again, just being willing to do things on my own. Canva is a great tool, again, a free tool that you can use for putting together graphics. And, I built my own website. Just again, I think you have to a very great extent, be unafraid, particularly if you're going to be writing memoir. But that also applies to just taking the reins and making your way. So my book will be coming out in just a couple of weeks from when we're having this interview. And I've got a book tour planned that I'm coinciding with visiting family. I'm going back to Minnesota, where the majority of the story took place, and, enjoying Thanksgiving with family and doing a bunch of book events. And I'll be doing events here in Alaska and various places, visiting friends. And I do intend to use it again as a tool to go see people I haven't seen for a long time.
Well, I think that's great. And they can support you there and bring in people to the places that you'll be. And so that's killing two birds with one stone, as my Southern daddy would say.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that these messages are really calling a lot of attention to some real hot button issues these days. And I did my sentimental tour with my first book called No Names to Be Given. I started at the maternity home where I was given birth and adopted. And then I went to my hometown where I grew up with my adoptive family, where the library is named for my mother. So it was a real sentimental journey where I started and where I grew up, and that was my journey for my first book. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your book and then read from it so that we can hear your tone and voice in the book?
When I was working on putting in the stories or the scenes that I wanted to use, I ended up having a lot more than I ended up using in the finished product. But it was an important part for me of just writing all of those various aspects of various moments in time that impacted how I've come to the place where I am right now. So in terms of writing, I encourage everyone, write as much as you can, because it's easier to cut than it is to fill in. So that was a really important thing for me. I follow the story in my book follows the 30 years that basically my son, early pregnancy, through our reunion, and then beyond after his death. So it's a 30-year window and really covers all of the ways that he impacted me, all the ways he changed me and made me who I am today. So that's really the whole structure of it. So it is linear. I did think for a time of doing flashbacks and going back and forth, and I tried it and it didn't work. So I ended up going back to the linear. So what I'm going to read for you is actually the very beginning of the book. And because I think it gives you both a sense of my writing style, but also kind of sets the scene of how things started and where it's going to be going. All right. All right. Chapter 1, Minnesota, August 1989. The ragged edge of grimy linoleum between the kitchen and the living room snagged my sock again. Shit. I caught myself on the refrigerator handle while trying to disentangle the threads connecting my foot to the floor. They just continued unraveling. Damn it. Once free, I yanked both socks off and threw them in the trash on top of a crumpled Doritos bag and a Coke can. Reaching over my newly emerged baby bump, I grabbed an old deformed plastic glass from the cupboard and filled it from the tap. Okay, I'll go, I said to Eddie, my boyfriend. He stood in the living room, frowning. I just think we need to go into this with our eyes open. His greasy obsidian hair melded into a black Van Halen concert t-shirt and his arms hung limply. He reminded me of a marionette. The following day, I slumped onto an oversized love seat at the counseling center. Eddie took the spot next to me and flipped open a copy of Catholic Digest he grabbed off the carved mahogany end table. The bitter aroma of freshly brewing coffee filled the waiting room, and above the single window and three-dimensional lettering, a sign proclaimed, Caritas Family Services, Catholic Charities. Crushed red velvet upholstery stood out against honey-colored walls, and a bronze sculpture of Mary Magdalene stood sentinel in one corner. Suddenly self-conscious of my messy hair, tie-dyed t-shirt, and faded blue jeans, I crossed my arms and tried to disappear. The putt-putt of the percolator ended abruptly in a final hiss just as the door opened behind the reception desk. A statuesque woman in long, flowing blouse and loose, wide-bottomed trousers floated over to us. Candace, Eddie, hi, I'm Joyce. In her mid-50s, she exuded confidence and calm. Fleshy facial features and lips that curved naturally into a smile belied her brisk voice. Very nice to meet you both. Would you please follow me? I trailed Joyce and Eddie down a spacious hall with matching wood-framed mirrors that alternated side to side above waist-high wainscoting. I caught glimpses of myself every few feet. I'd let my hair dry naturally, creating a straw-like halo that reached down to my shoulders. Joyce waved us into her small office. Piles of paper and books littered every surface except the chairs, a contrast to the sparse luxury of the lobby. It felt homey. Joyce took a seat behind the desk, a clipboard in front of her. I understand you're pregnant and trying to decide what to do. Eddie nodded. I shrugged, thinking about baby names. I love Cameron and Forrest. It's unique and artsy. Well, I'd like to collect a little information, give you some educational materials, and make a plan for how our agency might be able to help you. Interrupt and ask questions anytime you want, okay? I nodded, bringing my attention back to Joyce. How old are you two? I'm 21. Me too. Married? No, we both rushed to answer. How far along are you? I twisted a strand of hair. Almost 5 months. I'm due January 24th. Are you getting proper medical attention? Are you healthy? The doctor says that other than low blood pressure and being underweight, I'm okay. Good. Can you each tell me in your own words how you think I can help? She glanced at me first. He, I bobbed my head toward Eddie, said we should come. I didn't want to be there. I didn't need counseling to have a baby. Everybody has babies. But if Eddie wanted to explore how we could be better parents, I had to take him up on it. I'd seen too many friends and relatives abandoned by their boyfriends after getting pregnant, and I didn't want that to happen to me. Eddie? He leaned forward, one knee protruding from a hole in his Levi's. Well, because I don't know what to do. I never thought about having kids. I don't even know if I want kids. He shrugged. And, well, I'm in college. I don't want to have to quit school. I know an unplanned pregnancy can be very scary, Joyce said. I can help you consider your options. We can explore the details of parenting, including daily life and structure, how to budget, how you might deal with the stress of a crying baby, all of that. And we can look at adoption too. I don't want to give my baby away, I said, reeling back. I think it's probably the best way to go, Eddie said. I gaped at him. What the hell?
Now you had us right there. Right there. I could see all of that happening.
Yeah, that was the moment things changed. Yes.
How long did it take you to write the book?
I began in late spring of 2019, finished the manuscript at the end of 2020, and then had, revisions and things from my publisher.
Have you been working on writing essays and doing all kinds of online publicity for the book?
I've been working on a few essays. I had one published in Newsweek. I have another one coming out, hopefully, if all goes well, in another larger publication in the next month and a half or so. And just trying to find places to place those companion pieces to hopefully, get more recognition. I've also been working on developing some materials and like a type of curricula that I can present to conferences, specifically adoption related conferences, but also working with I went to school for a social work. So I have that background, and I'd love to be able to use this material to develop a curricula to help adoption professionals. Because the more information they have about all of the aspects of adoption, the better they're going to be able to both serve the communities that they're working with. But in particular, I think keeping in mind that the adoptee voice, the voice of the adopted person, is often lost in all of this. And it's an important part of the story that needs to be put more center. It needs to be centered. And I'm hoping I can be a strong ally for that and help, just basically just help to open that communication. I think that's such an important part.
Yeah. You're definitely right. I'm always interested in what people edited out of their book, what didn't make the cut.
So there were lots of like smaller scenes that ended up being cut out. They were important in my mind in the sense of maintaining a timeline, but they ended up not moving the story forward. Like, I might have had 3 or 4 scenes, for example, dealing with my difficulty in reunion. So when we first were reunited, he was 18, and he reached out to me, which I was so wonderfully grateful for. But my instinct of what I wanted to do was I wanted to drop everything, fly back down to Minnesota, go grab him, hang on, and never let go. I didn't want to let go again. And that was not the thing to do. So, in talking with my partner and, doing therapy, those kinds of things, I said, that is not what you need to do. You need to give him all of the control, because he's the only one that didn't have control when this all happened. So I had all these scenes of my angst, my desire to go find him, I just wanted so much to build a relationship with him, but I needed him to have control. So I ended up, instead of having 10 of those scenes, I have 3. And it made it better. It made it easier for people to digest without going too far down the rabbit hole, I guess, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Definitely. We sometimes can go down the rabbit hole with our research and then writing our precious darling sentences that we don't want to cut, so we have a whole file of things that made it to the cutting room floor that we can use maybe another time.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I had begun my originally had begun the piece with a prologue. And I hung on to that prologue and I hung on to that prologue and I finally had to let it go. But it took, it took all the way till getting to the publisher for her to say, okay, got to let that go. Like, okay.
I think publishers are the only ones who don't like prologues. I love prologues.
Well, but I had heard it from many other people as well. I had heard it from a lot of corners. So in writing my book, I utilized an online writers group that was specifically memoir. So it was a group of about 12 people, and we would do 6-week like sections where we would have break into groups of 6 for 6 weeks and share chapters. So I would receive 5 chapters from the other writers and give my chapter to 5 other writers, and we would give critiques. Yeah. And it was a very it was a wonderful way to write. It was a wonderful way to get feedback, to make things better, because the group was made up of some people that had writing experience and some that didn't, people from all walks of life. So they brought a really great diverse background to that. And but yeah, many of them said, the prologue is great, but you're probably going to have to cut it. But it took till that very end before I did. And it does. It makes it a better book. The book is better because I did take that out.
Do you have any other books in you?
Oh, absolutely. Now that I've done it, I feel like I could write many books. Will I? I don't know, but possibly. Right now, the thing that comes to mind is thinking about me and my husband, our stories of adventure. I think it would be a really fun adventure book that would encompass traveling around the world and some pretty cute love stories and some pretty funny stories. So, yeah.
And you're cycling across the United States. So you've done so many interesting things.
Yeah. So I'd like to, it would be fun. And I think he would work with me on it. He's not a writer himself, but he loves to tell stories. So it would be a fun project for us to work on together. Yeah.
What do you think was the best money you've ever spent as a writer?
Wow. And I have not spent very much money because I've been really trying to do this on my own. The group that I worked with for writing with the memoirs, it was a subscription, and that was well worth the money. Absolutely. And it really did. Again, it both kept me accountable. I had to keep up. Reading other people's work made me a better writer, to look for things that I wanted to change. And yeah, so that was probably the best money I ever spent. And it wasn't very much. It was like $50 a year or something. So yeah.
That was well worth it then. Yeah. I think critique partners are wonderful to have. And isn't it amazing how I can see every typo in your work, but I can't see them in mine?
Yes, absolutely. It's amazing, isn't it? Yes. And the other thing Grammarly, that's very much worthwhile money. And I also recommend for writers, any kind of writer, using the read back feature. Whatever program you're using, but use that feedback feature, because it will catch things. You'll hear it where you can't always see it.
I always read my work out loud, and I stumble over things and didn't realize how cumbersome they were, until you read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reading out loud is both doing it yourself and listening to others. It's very helpful.
Well, Candace, as always, our last interview question is, our writers over 50 are quite unique. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above?
I advise people, if they have any inclination to write, to just try, put your hand to it and see what happens. But beyond that, then don't be afraid to try to submit it somewhere. There are thousands of publications out there, whether online or in print, that accept submissions year round, and you don't have to spend money on it either. So if you want to write and you want to put your work out there, do it and submit and see what happens, because can feel vulnerable, but it can also feel very rewarding.
Well, I think that's great advice, and I just appreciate so much your being with us today to share such a poignant story. I look forward to reading your work and looking forward to more in the future from you, especially those adventure stories. And we're happy now to say that you are now one of our authors over 50.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's been great to be here with you.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend, and check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's D-A-I-L-Y, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing, and remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.